We're so very grateful, but oh my gosh, what a backlash that brought about from his own people as well as his colleagues and others. Got many beautiful feedbacks on the internet, but awful stuff as well because of what he had done and opened his doors to this community. And out of that grew a deep friendship between the two communities, and now they get together every month and they feed the homeless in the community. They do things for the homeless in the community, and they're planning other ways to serve the community together. Now you see, there's a true neighbor, a wonderful example of what it is to be a true neighbor. There's an example of, yes, you may come and sit around the table of my life and you may feel safe and welcomed, and you will be regarded and treated as a member of this family. That's a wonderful example of that happening. So, what is it in your life and in mine that we're still clinging to and hanging on to that would keep us guarded and would keep us isolated from suspect people that we learned to be suspect of before we even knew what it was to learn to be suspect of as small little ones? I'll give you a real example of that. When I grew up in holy Catholic Ireland, you couldn't go near a Protestant. Oh! And if you attended, even sat inside the door, a friend of yours was being married, a Protestant friend, and you sat inside the door to be at the wedding ceremony, you couldn't go to the parish priest even for confession. You had to go to the bishop. It was so bad. The bishop, no less. And when my brother-in-law's father made his transition, he was a Protestant, and he educated those children in their catechism for First Holy Communion and confirmation. He could go as far as the gates of the church. He couldn't attend his own father's funeral. That's how bad those Protestants were. God knows what would have happened. We couldn't listen to Protestant services on the radio. We have come from far. However, I always thought that was a load of rubbish anyway, even as a child. And you know, you'd be surprised at the seeds of what is sown into us as small children, how those seeds can still produce spiritual oxalis. And we have to keep weeding that stuff up. What we don't know, we suspect. What we don't know, we suspect. We don't know it. You never know. It could be this, that, and the other. That's why you and I have to get to know our neighbors. That's why you and I have to be open and receptive to mixing and mingling with all kinds of people, colors, classes, and creeds. And when we do, the realization is, oh my gosh, they're just like us. Just like us. Just like us. And some of them are even nicer than we are. Fancy that. Fancy that. Some of them are a wonderful example to us and how we could be living our lives deeper in that sense of spirituality. So yes, we don't get out of not embracing our neighbor, whoever our neighbor has to be. There's one life out of which all life is created. That one life is your life, it's my life, and it's everybody else's life too. I can't say, welcome God over here, and God, get out of Dodge over here. You have no seat around my table. You see. And be an authentic truth student. I cannot do that. So this is not a time for you and for me to be withdrawing from anyone or anything. This is not a time for you and for me to be backing away from what seems to be challenging and difficult. This is a time for you and for me to be moving into, going forward, and meeting meeting whatever seems to be a challenge for me. This is a time for you and for me not to be going into isolation and worry. This is a time for you and for me to be engaging and making connection. This is not a time for you and for me to be shrinking and to be backing off from what I don't understand or am slightly afraid of. This is a time for you and for me to be stretching into that and going forward. This is a time for you and for me to really listen very carefully to what's going on in my spiritual life. And what is really going on in my spiritual life is I am being called, as you are being called, to stop sitting back in the back benches, to stop being reserves, keeping myself ready for whatever, and when the time comes, I will measure up. We are being called to stop being reserves and to start being center forwards and center fielders and getting into the game and playing the game from that centered vantage point of view. We are called now to measure up to what we say we believe in. We are called to measure up to what we say and who we say we are. We are called to put the principle into practice and stop hiding behind the facade of spiritual, and I have to say it, spiritual ideology. The ideology is not enough, it's useless, unless I take from it its purity and truth and I begin to live from it and put it into practice and put myself out there, even though as I advance toward the good and the reconciliation of all and the unification of all, I will be stoned for it, for even from my own people. They will stone me for it. That man lost 20 of his people, which is about 5% of the whole congregation, his own people. And he said, we did everything we could to sit down and have conversation with them and reconcile with them. But listening to what they were thinking and feeling and saying, we felt the grace of God relieving us of this energy so that they would not be representing us in the world anymore. So remember, when you are doing right by life and living, everything unlike right will come out of the woodwork and challenge you. But we must not be afraid. We must not be afraid. Greatness is right. Might is not necessarily so. And you and I don't have to become great. Get it deep within yourself. There's nothing to become great about. You are born from greatness as greatness. You always were great. You are great now and you always will be great. We just have to let the greatness come through. And it will when we get over the fear and the trepidation that we have about, oh, this and oh, that and oh, the next thing. We will not be divided and conquered. We will be unified and we will overcome in spite of ourselves. We will indeed. We will overcome because we are one. We are one. The power of one, and you are the power of one. The power of one is within you. You can feel it. You can embrace it. You can think it. You can say it. You can live it. You can share it. The power of one, and there's no greater power. And as divided as we seem to be in our own selves, in our own country, it's not the truth. And you don't have to give credence to the division that the media keeps telling us that is there all the time and that it's impossible. It's not. We are not divided. We are one. We are one. We are one. Because the greatness of America, the greatness of the people of the world is within each individual person. And when we catch on to that light and that fire and that power and that passion, we are unstoppable. Yes. So stand up and stretch forward and do not be allowing anything to tell you otherwise, that you are not great and you are great now, that this country is not great and it is great now, that this world is not great and it's great now, and you are part of that. Breathe it into it, and bring it on home, and so it is. And let me tell you,